What's up, everybody? Dan here with Dan and Sarah Makers, and in this video we are going to talk about PEX pipe. PEX is the new kind of popular pipe that you're seeing a lot in new construction, even commercial construction nowadays. It's basically a plastic tubing. It's a cross-linked polyethylene, and it's a flexible tubing, but it's very fast to install. There are a multitude of, several different colors. You can get it color-coded for hot, cold. Actually, this would be hot, cold, and then just kind of a neutral white, which is universal. You can do it either way. I wouldn't be surprised if they've even got purple nowadays, but I'm not sure for reclaimed water systems. But PEX is a really unique type of tubing. It tends to resist freeze breakage just because it is a plastic and it can expand a little bit. It's very fast. I know there are some people that complain about the fact that they think that it kind of has a plastic taste that doesn't go away. So there are some drawbacks to it. But as far as installation speed, very fast, very durable, and it's pretty simple. I mean, for a complete installation, I basically need a cutter, a tubing cutter of some sort. I like these kind of chopping style here. I don't, the spinning tubular cutters with a cutting wheel, they don't cut that well on PEX tubing. And then also a hacksaw, you've got a lot of little fibers and things like that. I mean, you can cut it with a hacksaw if you need to, but you have to go through and clean up the end of the tube pretty well and make sure that you don't have a lot of particles of plastic in your pipe. And then the next tool that you would need would be a crimper. And this one here is set for 1/2 inch and 3/4 inch PEX crimp rings. It's got a really good positive final point where you know that you've actually crimped the fitting down. There's a different style of ring, which I'll show you here in a minute, which requires a different style of tool. And this one just kind of clamps onto the crimp ring, and it's a stainless steel one. And it basically goes until it unlocks itself. So there's this style here, and there's pros and cons, which is why I have both styles. And then for the first large crimp ring, if you ever need to take apart a system, you can cut the fittings out, and then this tool here will actually cut those copper crimp rings off and allow you to reuse the fittings, which is nice because the fittings are probably the most expensive part of the system. So let's move the camera here, and I'll show you some of the fittings, and then we will show the actual assembly and disassembly of some of these fittings here. There's kind of an array of different types of fittings out there. This is only a sample of them, but we've got adapters and then we've got standard fittings. Adapters are useful because sometimes we are going from, say, a threaded pipe where we need to go into an existing fitting, say it's a galvanized fitting, and we want to go to I forget the name of this pipe. This is the old stuff that, this gray pipe here, this was used in a lot of mobile homes, and there was a big lawsuit because it was so unreliable. And here, I just happened to have a small section of 3/4 inch tubing left over, so I kept that for that reason. So if we want to adapt to that, we can. There's also, this one's a Shark Bite. This one's going into 3/4 inch CPVC. And the neat thing about these types of fittings here, as you can see, we've got a plastic one, we've got a copper one, we've got a brass one. These will go from a PEX tubing to copper or CPVC, which looks a lot like PVC pipe, but it's a chlorinated polyvinyl chlorinate, which doesn't leach out bad stuff when it gets hot. So you can use that for potable water where it does get heated. So we can adapt to different types of pipe from PEX, or PEX to different types of pipe. We've also got, this is just a made-up adapter where I've gone from, this is a glued CPVC fitting. It has a molded in copper female adapter, and then I've threaded in an adapter for PEX. This here can be replaced by any one of these three fittings. So this is kind of not going to be as required. It's a little bit bulkier, a little bit more expensive, but honestly, in my opinion, it's a little bit more reliable because you have a good glue fitting here and you have a crimped PEX fitting here. So that's just my opinion. This particular fitting here, if we look close, it's a coupling for 1/2 inch, but it's PEX on one side, and then it's the this gray type of pipe on this side here. This is 1/2 inch, this is 3/4, but we would put that gray pipe on that side. It's got a lot more rings for the tubing to bite into, and then PEX over on this side. And because of different wall thicknesses, we do have 2 different styles of crimp rings for this. So, yeah. So that's a different adapter there. And these probably would work. Some of the early types of PEX style fittings, this is a, let's see, Kiltech, something like that. As you can see, the early types of tubing, this is actually shielded. It has a thin layer of aluminum, and it's got plastic on either side. So there's an aluminum tube encased in plastic. And this has a galvanized metal crimp ring on it. And these are 3 types of fittings from that. They actually had 2 O-rings on each barbed fitting that would go inside their plastic tubing. So these aren't used to my knowledge anymore, just because it isn't needed. They've got better technology, better plastic, better reliability, and things like that, so they don't need those O-rings. So that was an early style. We also have different types of plastic types of fittings that you can get that will take the place of the brass fittings. I prefer the brass ones personally. There is a different type of tubing out there. This one, as you can see, this is 3/4, this is 1/2, but the wall thickness is much, much thicker on this, and it's kind of a translucent color. This type of fitting doesn't require a crimp ring, and they have a tool that goes inside and it expands the tubing and stretches it out. And then once it's stretched out, you quickly slip it over the fitting, and then it shrinks down. But you've also taken a clear, it looks like a thin piece of this tubing, and short, or a small sleeve, kind of about the size of this, and you've also expanded that, and you slide it over this portion of the pipe, and as the pipe and that ring contract back down to their original size, they're kind of elastic, it then makes a connection. Milwaukee, their M12 and M18 series of cordless tools, they have a lot of power tools that do this kind of work, and very, very specialized tools. But anyways, as far as crimp rings, ways to connect this and secure our tubing down on the outsides of these fittings, there are 3 main types. There's a solid ring, a metal ring. This is just a coated copper ring. This is just a plain copper ring. This is actually a PEX brand. And these are just rings that get squashed down and crimped over the tubing. There's a stainless steel ring here. And this one here, I'll show you how they work and how these types of rings differ. These are nice in some situations, but they're more difficult to get off your tubing if you want to reuse your fitting. And then there's this type of ring, which is basically that same style of crimp ring, but it's got this collar on the end of it that keeps it from sliding too far over the pipe. Using the tool to crimp with this can be a little bit challenging, especially in tight confined areas where you're trying to hold this on the pipe in the right spot. This holds itself in the right spot, so it's a lot easier. They call it a one-hand ring. So we'll set up some tubing to where I can start crimping some fittings together, and we'll show you that. We're going to just connect several different types of fittings together to show you. So I've got this one piece kind of held in the clamp loosely, a little bit too loosely. There we go. It's a little better. So for cutting, I just use this cutter here and just stick it in. Try and get it as square as you can, and very, very simple to cut. The larger style of PEX tubing, you can get, I believe, PEX up to 2 inch, at least last time I saw. So first we'll use this type of slip ring fitting, which is the most simple. It just slides over the tubing, and then we use, in this case we'll use a coupling. We slide that in, and we slide this crimp ring back over to here, approximately, so we're trying to center it. We've got our crimpers, and we need to put those crimpers on, and this is where it gets a little tricky because that ring wants to slip around. And if you're working inside of a wall or vertically, it becomes even more challenging. So we just get this crimper on there, and we push nice and stiff until that crimper snaps shut. And that's why it has these big nubs here, because if it didn't have those, you'd smash your knuckles pretty badly. So what that crimper has done is it has put a little nub there and a nub there, and it's compressed this ring down on the fitting. So if we want to now show this type of crimp ring here, this one's different than this one, because this one here, as I was crimping down, I could have slid back and forth on the pipe. If I was in a vertical position, it would have been even more challenging. This one goes over the tubing, and it has that red edge actually stops that crimp ring from moving. So I can very easily slide that on, know it's far enough on, push my tubing all the way onto the fitting, and that crimp ring's not going anywhere. So when I go to crimp, I'm not concerned about that moving around. So I crimp it, there we go. So there's our fitting already. Now, let's say we want to, well, let's see here. So many choices. Let's look at one of these Shark Bite type fittings here. We're going to cut our tubing, and we want to install our Shark Bite fitting. We need to take one of these plastic ferrules or sleeves and put it inside of our tubing, because our tubing can actually collapse a little bit on us and be a little bit too big, or shrink down, because there are barbs inside of here that require the tubing to maintain its position. So we just slide it on, bottom it out, and that's our connection. We're good. So we'll do one more chunk of pipe. Let's slide our sleeve in there, and we'll just push it in nice and straight, bottomed out. We're good. I'm going to cut off a little bit of this here, and then we're going to adapt over to a CPVC adapter. And we're going to use our stainless steel ring here. So we put our ring on, we put our PVC adapter on, and then we slide our ring back. This ring, the stainless steel, is nice because if I'm right up against a stud or I'm in a very confined space, I can get this plier right over it, and that plier actually holds that clamp in its nose, and I'll show you here in a second. You crimp it until it unlocks, and there you go. So the jaw on this has a very small opening here, and this will take 1/2 inch all the way through, I think, 1 inch, but this is a 3/4 inch. So basically these clamps have a little square or rectangular crimp zone, and I can hold that in there. This is nice when you're up against a stud or you're in a very confined space, because these jaws can get up into that area and the handles are back out of the way. Whereas with these pliers, the jaws have to open up quite a ways, and the handles, I mean, they've got a massive span. They're probably 18 inches wide, and you've got to get your hands in there and do that. So that stainless steel crimper is really nice. But as I said, a little bit more challenging to remove these crimps here. So to show you the removal of these crimps, we're going to take our tubing cutter. We're going to come back so we know we're far enough back that we're not going to cut into the brass, because that would kind of wreck our tubing cutter. So I've cut it back, and as you can see, the brass is back in there another 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to actually cut off just a sliver, try and keep that tubing tight so it doesn't twist and get a really crooked cut. But now I'm pretty close to the fitting. So that's where this tool comes in. and it's basically got a rod and then a blade. And so what we do is we take that rod, we stick it into the fitting, and we see that blade is actually extending up along that crimp ring. And we just push down on it until it snaps. And there's an adjustment nut here so you don't overcut or undercut. I then twist it, spin it around. As you can see here, we've got a pretty good cut. It actually goes just into the tubing, just a little bit. So we're going to spin it around a little bit. All you need to do is crimp it. You don't need to actually cut through all the way. On the second side, that crimp just bends it open and gets it out of the way. And then sometimes these will slide off, other times you need to use a utility knife or something. But if you can see, it's spinning free now. So that's how you can remove the fitting from existing tubing and reuse it. For these here, this ring, and I have a tool somewhere, I'm not sure. Let me see if I can find that here and I'll show you how to take these out. Well, I'm not able to find my 1/2 inch, which is what I was going to show you, but I do have a 3/4 inch. And as you can see, it's pretty basic. It's just this horseshoe thing. But I do have a 3/4 fitting into a Shark Bite style fitting. And what you can do is you can just slide it over the pipe. It just snaps on, and this will go over copper, CPVC, or PEX. And the goal is to push down this ring that extends past the brass fitting. So you pull down on that, and this will probably be next to impossible to do on film, but we'll give it a try anyway. So as I push down, it has a little bit of an elastic kind of springiness to it. Yeah, this might be way more challenging than I thought on film. So I've got a pair of channel locks to help. There we go. So just had to wiggle it a little bit. So that releases the barbs on the inside and basically pushes them down so they don't continue to dig into the pipe. You can see where the pipe's kind of scarred up as I pulled it off. And here's that interior ring or ferrule that keeps the pipe from collapsing. So you can reuse this, and you can reuse this. And this is, whoops, garbage now. It's a couple cents worth of pipe, and that's about it. I hope this short video helped give you a little bit of an understanding of PEX pipe and the types of fittings and methods of attaching it and also disassembling it there are out there. As far as PEX goes, like I said, it's really fast, it's really easy. The tubing and the crimp rings themselves are rather inexpensive. There's a lot less risk of fire and things like that related to installing a PEX system. It's great for temporary work, especially if you're doing renovation, remodel work, and you need to move a kitchen or a water heater or something like that. It's an awesome way to really quickly temp in and reliably temp in water supplies to different facilities. As far as the tools, they're not that expensive compared to a torch, a tubing cutter, deburring stuff, all the consumables that go with soldering, and it's very easy to learn. There's a little bit of strength that you have to have with your hands, so if you don't have a lot of hand strength, maybe it's not quite the way to go, or else have somebody else come along and they can clunk, snap the fittings and crimp them for you. But the one main thing that I've learned when I was a plumber, we didn't use PEX because PEX didn't exist back in the late 90s to any real extent. It was more the early 2000s that it started to come into play. You can get your tubing in straight lengths. You go to Home Depot or Lowe's, you can find them in 5-foot, 10-foot lengths. You go to Professional Plumbing Supply and you'll find them in 20-foot lengths, and they're straight. I would highly recommend getting the straight sections of tubing. You can get it in 100-foot coils, but that stuff wants to stay coiled, and when you're trying to run it and snake it under a floor, in an attic, in a wall, wherever, you're constantly going to be fighting this tubing that wants to go back to a coiled shape. And it's very, very difficult to get them lined up straight and try and get the fittings, you know, to go in, because the pipe's always constantly trying to curl off. So I would recommend getting the straight sections. Don't get the big coils unless for some reason you know that you've got a really, really, really long stretch and you got a lot of room to play with and you're only putting a few fittings in. So yeah, that's about it for PEX tubing. So be sure to give me a thumbs up if you like this video. Leave a comment if you have any comments or questions, and subscribe. That really helps out, and we appreciate all the views. Until next time, this is Dan with Dan and Sarah Makers. Bye.